Behind every great discovery in human history, there is often a name that has been erased, a face that has been hidden, and a voice that was silenced by the tides of time. We are told the stories of great men, of kings, and famous scientists. But what about the ones who worked in the shadows? What about the brilliant minds, whose life-saving work was stolen and claimed by those with more power? Today, we are diving into the heart of a mystery and a tragedy. This is the story of a young woman, a genius, who at the age of 24, found the cure for one of the most terrifying diseases in human history. Her name was Alice Ball, but for nearly a century, the world didn't even know she existed. Why was her name scrubbed from the record? How did a university president steal her legacy? And most importantly, why is her courage more relevant today than ever before? Let's uncover the remarkable and heartbreaking journey of Alice Ball. Imagine, if you can, a time when the word leprosy was a death sentence. In the early 1900s, those diagnosed with leprosy, or Hansen's disease, were not just sick, they were outcasts. They were torn away from their families and exiled to remote islands, left to rot in isolation and pain. The world was terrified of them. There was no hope, and there was no cure. Doctors tried using oil from the chamugra tree, but it was thick, sticky, and impossible for the body to absorb. If you swallowed it, you vomited. If you rubbed it on the skin, it did nothing. If you injected it, it caused painful abscesses. The cure was just as agonizing as the disease itself. Into this world of despair stepped Alice Ball. Born in 1892 in Seattle, Alice was a woman who defied every single barrier placed in her path. She was a woman of color. In an era of deep systemic racism, she was a woman in science. In a world that believed women belonged in the kitchen. But Alice was different. Her mind was a sharp instrument of logic and chemistry. She became the first African American and the first woman to earn a master's degree from the University of Hawaii. She was a trailblazer. Long before the world was ready for her light. At the university, Alice was approached by a surgeon who was desperate to help the leprosy patients on the island of Molokai. He had seen the suffering, and he knew the chamugra oil held the answer. But it needed a chemist to unlock its power. Alice, only 23 years old at the time, took on the challenge. She worked tirelessly in the laboratory, surrounded by glass vials and chemical reagents, searching for a way to make the oil injectable. She wasn't just doing science. She was fighting for the lives of thousands of people who had been forgotten by society. Day and night, Alice experimented. She used a complex process called the Ball method. Though she didn't call it that at the time, she managed to isolate the ethyl esters from the fatty acids of the oil. This was a breakthrough that chemists had been seeking for decades. She created the first ever water-soluble, injectable cure for leprosy. Because of Alice Ball, a diagnosis was no longer a death sentence. Because of Alice, people could finally go home to their families. She had done the impossible. She had conquered a disease that had plagued humanity for thousands of years. But then, tragedy struck. In 1916, at the age of only 24, Alice Ball fell ill. Some say it was an accident in the lab, a chlorine gas exposure, but the records are unclear. She died before she could ever publish her findings. She died before she could see the first patients walk free from the leper colonies. And it was in this moment of darkness that a shadow moved in to steal her light. Arthur Dean, the president of the university, and a fellow chemist, saw the value of Alice's work. Instead of honoring the young woman who had died, he took her research. He published it under his own name. He called it the Dean Method. He stood on stages and accepted the applause, while Alice lay in an unmarked grave. For years, for decades, history books credited Arthur Dean with the cure for leprosy. The young woman who had actually done the work, who had made the sacrifice, was erased. She became a ghost, a footnote in a story that belonged entirely to her. It wasn't until many years later that the truth began to leak out. Colleagues who had worked with Alice began to speak up. They remembered the young girl who spent her nights over the bubbling chemicals. They remembered that Arthur Dean had done nothing but put his name on a paper he didn't write. The fight to reclaim Alice's legacy was long, and it was difficult. It took nearly 90 years for the University of Hawaii to finally, officially, recognize her work. It took nearly a century for the world to stop calling it the Dean Method and start calling it the Ball Method. Alice Ball's life is a testament to the power of the human spirit and the absolute resilience of truth. She represents every woman, every person of color, and every innovator whose work has been taken by those in power. Her story is a reminder that the truth may be buried, but it can never be killed. Alice didn't work for the fame or the money. She worked because she cared about the suffering of others. She worked because she believed that science could be a bridge to compassion. Her legacy teaches us 3 fundamental lessons. First, the lesson of sacrifice. Alice gave her life, literally, for her research. She worked in dangerous conditions, with toxic chemicals, because she knew the stakes were high. She understood that sometimes, to save the many, one must endure the trials of the few. Her sacrifice is the reason thousands of people were able to live in dignity, rather than die in exile. Second, is the lesson of integrity. In today's world, where everyone wants instant credit, Alice reminds us that the work itself is what matters. Even though her name was stolen, her cure still worked. The lives she saved were real, even if the world didn't know her name yet. But her story also challenges us to be people of integrity. It challenges us to give credit where it is due, and to stand up for the truth, even when it is uncomfortable, or when it goes against those in power. And finally, the lesson of perseverance. Alice Ball faced every possible no that society could throw at her. No, you cannot be a scientist. No, you cannot get a degree. No, you cannot change the world. She ignored every single one of them. She focused on her goal, and she achieved it. Her life is a call to action. For anyone who feels like an outsider, it is a message that your mind, your heart, and your work are valid, even if the world isn't ready to see you yet. If Alice Ball's story, her courage, and her stolen legacy have moved you, please don't forget to subscribe, give this video a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's work together to make sure her name is never forgotten again. Let's spread the word about the woman who cured leprosy at 24, and whose light, finally, after 100 years, is shining as bright as it was always meant to. As we look at the world today, we must ask ourselves, how many other Alice Balls are out there? How many brilliant minds are being ignored today because of their gender, their race, or their background? Alice's story is not just a story of the past, it is a mirror for the present. It calls us to look closer, to listen better, and to value the contributions of all people, especially those who work in the silence. The cure for leprosy was more than just a chemical formula. It was an act of love. It was a bridge that brought the exiled back to the world. Alice Ball was the architect of that bridge. Though she never got to walk across it herself, she built it with her own hands and her own genius. We honor her today, not just as a scientist, but as a hero who was lost, but now is found. Her life challenges us to reflect on our own journey. What are we willing to sacrifice for the truth? How deeply do we trust in our own potential, even when the world doubts us? Alice remained steadfast, and her work changed the course of medical history forever. In every hospital, in every lab, and in every heart that values justice, the spirit of Alice Ball lives on. She is a reminder that greatness is not measured by the number of awards you win, or the number of papers you publish with your name at the top. Greatness is measured by the impact you leave on the world, and the lives you save when no one is watching. Alice's impact is immeasurable. Thousands of families were reunited. Thousands of lives were reclaimed. And a disease that was once a nightmare became a manageable reality. We must celebrate her journey. We must honor her resilience. And we must commit ourselves to the same level of excellence and empathy. Let Alice's courage be your daily reminder that your work matters, your voice matters, and even if it takes 100 years, the truth will always find its way home. Alice Ball, the woman who unlocked the cure, the woman who was erased, and the woman who is now, finally, a legend. Her story is a beacon of hope for every innovator, every dreamer, and every soul that has ever felt invisible. You are not invisible. Your work is not in vain. The world is finally watching, and we are finally listening. Let us carry her torch forward into a future where every brilliant mind is celebrated and every legacy is protected. The journey of Alice Ball is a journey from the shadows to the light. It is a story of a cure, a crime, and the ultimate triumph of the truth. May we all have the courage of Alice Ball. May we all have the vision to see the cure where others only see the disease. And may we all have the strength to stand for what is right, no matter the cost. Alice's light is a light that will never go out again. It is a light for all of us.